I gotta fix my camera right out the gate, baby. Hey, everybody. I did. It's just the way it is. I gotta make it cockeyed to make it center. It's just crazy.
Push to technical problems.
Push to technical problems. Problem exists between the chair and keyboard. All right, just pointing that out to everybody.
The classic issue.
By the way, so yeah,
Wow, push to PEBCAC. There's a show
push to
title.
PEBCAC. There you go, baby. Hey, everybody, welcome. September 2nd, 2023. Push to Talk, episode 8962.36729. All right, here we are. By the way, comment on the sound, because I made myself louder and everybody else quieter. So we'll see if that evens out the sound just a little bit. I didn't consult with McLeod, so your mileage may vary prior to doing that, since he is the clear expert. We are joined here. We are, in our CSM at part 2. And no, I'm not going to fix the comma that I accidentally typoed in the title. I don't care that much about anything to fix that.
It's
all right?
totally fine, dude.
So,
Remember, kids,
free comma.
down below.
Free comma for everybody.
Definitely comma down below.
Yes, maybe I'll be more calm this week because I've actually had food, so that's always good that I have lunch since I'm U.S. Eastern time. But were
you hangry last episode? Was that the issue?
I was a little hang.
Oh,
That's what we in the literary field call the Pittsburgh comma. No one's sure why it's there. Nobody wants it there, but it's not going away.
Yeah. Yun's gonna like it with their permane sandwiches.
Is it like unnecessary code in C#? If you remove the comma, all of a sudden everything breaks?
No, it's like unnecessary parentheses. No. It's unnecessary parentheses in Lisp. Okay, let's go way back. Okay, because AI is all the rage. So we are joined today. We've got Gideon.
It's the season. It's the CSM season for mispronouncing people's names. So
Okay.
As always.
Oh, so Gideon Zendikar, is that right? Did I say that right?
That's pretty much correct. So
Pretty much, not exactly. You're just in the ballpark, Eric. Okay, right? Mike Azaria, right? And Yondu Quill.
You got that one wrong.
Okay.
It's Azariah.
Azariah. I think you probably do really good cartoons, though. If you did, and you'd be in
Azariah
episode.
is the guy who does the voices, excellent at it. Azariah is an Old Testament prophet. So
there you go.
My grandfather's name.
There you go. You got everything in that one. Did I say Yondu? Yondu Quill? All right, Yondu.
yes, that's correct.
Okay, but by the way, I can't believe we have 2 people that haven't properly bent the bills of their hats. I mean, come on, who do you think you are?
I mean,
Not crazy. It's crazy shit.
It's young people.
People.
Life's just better, just not caring about such trivial things, Eric.
Well, Mike mentioned earlier that he was like old, and I'm old too. Mike. I just
look at all the sun that is shining into McLeod's room.
Oh no.
UK, I'm in the UK and it's like this. Like
hold it, McLeod isn't really McLeod, okay? He's Michael, the fucking archangel, okay? All right, that's why he's got all the shit around him.
It's pretty simple, Eric. When McLeod is sitting in a room, there's no clouds outside, right? Because they're all in that room.
the clouds in here. Yeah.
Commander Starscream, I gave them a boost, so let us know how the sound is coming across to you.
Christ.
Wouldn't
Yes,
By the way,
yes, my child.
To start CSM stuff early, I used to, in previous CSMs, drive the CCP devs crazy because I'd sit outside in the sunshine in September and October while meeting with them. And they'd be going, "Are you actually outside or is that backdrop?" And I'd pick the camera up and show, green grass. See those things over there, kids? Those are called trees.
Trees, yeah.
They don't have many of those in Iceland.
Look at
Yeah, that's
I'm
true.
gonna pan to the left.
Looks like if you're not on a godforsaken rock in the North Atlantic.
I'm going to pan to the left, and these are what we call cows. They give us beef. Okay. Yeah. All right.
And milk. Don't forget milk.
Oh yeah. Well, that's the cows. Yeah. Here.
And I have learned recently that they enjoy kicking balls about.
Oh yeah, they do.
Of all things.
I'm not.
And by the way,
Caleb's not here. We can't go there. Okay.
That is true. That is
true. I keep telling you, cows are just giant dogs.
They are. Cows.
This is the kind of random conversation and tangents that we go down all the time on this show. By the way, so Mike, Gideon, Yondu, yeah, that's
you're welcome to engage and make
more
fun
of this, but we will talk about Eve and about CSM
in other
stuff.
words,
So don't worry about
it's a little bit more focused and on topic than your average CSM campaign thread by about 3.
By the way, Mike led us down this tangent. Okay, it all started with him. Okay, I'm just going to point that out.
Well, I have the running joke that getting me to talk about CSM is easy. Getting me to shut up about it is something different.
Well, we're going to try, and I'm going to try bringing this back on rails every now and then by asking you now to introduce yourself. Gideon, why don't you start?
Okay, I'm Gideon. I started seeing within Eve in Providence when there was still a Provi block that was under the no red, don't shoot policy. I later developed my FCing in Legacy, which was the big coalition that Test Alliance was part of. And after I had some disagreements with leadership in Invictus, I moved back into Provi block, but this time not as one of their members, but as one of their adversaries. So I joined TRC, which was a new pro-friendly alliance with a university alliance attached to it. Was there, FC'd there. Later got kicked for being an Init spy, funnily enough. I've never interacted with Init before. But I was kicked for an Init spy. Let me just finish, then you can step in, Cloud. Okay. That has to be funny from the Init side as well. Like, if you have some stories about that, you could talk about that. I moved into Thera then, because obviously I had an accusation of being an Init spy, and I didn't want to prove my accusers right by joining Init, because that would be the last alliance I could join. I just moved into Thera, joined a small gang alliance that is desync, and that's where I'm currently at. I'm small gang PvPing with the Thera boys and the group that developed over time then now with people might know the alliance Nightmare. There will be violence. Those are a creation out of my FCing in Thera and involving other people that started joining Thera as well.
I just got one question here. Nice. We invited Panda on the show as well because we thought it would be a nice joke.
Yeah, I was inviting him, and we've got some big ops going on right now, so he couldn't really make today. But I wanted to invite Pando over and introduce Pando as your handler.
So good. I just want to point out that no one has ever seen you and Pando in the same room, so
we can sort that out by getting me to the CSM, and then there will be pictures of that, I hope. So,
well, we're trying our best.
That's true.
Right, nice. Mike, why don't you talk about yourself a bit?
Hi there, I'm Mike Azariah, not Azaria, and I am, if I win this election, I will have served in 1/3 of the CSM's total. I am considered kind of the archival memory for CSM because I ran for the first one, CSM 3, and have run in a lot of the elections since. I took a few years off here and there, but I served in CSM 8, 9, and 10, 15, and 16. Running joke is some of the most dysfunctional ones that we've had so far. Cause and effect, not necessarily, but I've been there for some good times and some bad times. And over the years, I've seen the CSM change, grow, redefine itself several times. It's really hard when you're somebody who's been CSM a lot and they say, what is the CSM? Well, how long do you have? In game, as of September 6th of this month, I will have celebrated 15 years of playing Eve. So 15 years of playing, I fought in one nullsec war on the side of NC Dot against goons. And so I've done warfare. I've lived in a wormhole, C5 for 6 months doing escalations. Haven't done Pochven. That's a hole I've got in my system, and I haven't done faction war. But manufacturing, mining, missions, you get to do a lot of stuff. What I've settled down to recently, over the past 8 years, is driving Operation Magic School Bus, which is a new initiative, or an initiative to help new bros get into the game. I go to career systems and hand out fitted ships to anyone under 30 days who speaks up and docks up. I get accused of running a scam far more often than you would expect. It's kind of funny where the ISDs actually sometimes follow me around just to assure the new bros that it's not a scam. So immediately ISD are now labeled as scammers as well.
That is what a scammer would say.
Yeah, that's something they ask me, how can you prove you're not a scammer? And my comeback is, what words can I use that scammers can't? It's the proof is in the pudding. Dock up, I hand you a ship, you click accept without putting anything on your side and walk away. What part of this do you think I can trick you out of something? That's what I use direct trade to give stuff out. So if they put ISK in, I will close it because I said it's free. Don't make a liar of me. And I'll open the trade again and say, don't put money in there. Just take the ship. It's funny seeing the number of vets who show up, make a new bro, and take a ship from me just to find out what the trick is and walk away going, how is he doing this and not broke? Because I've been handing out ships, fitted ships, all the way up to cruisers for 8 years now and haven't run dry. The running joke is I'll keep doing it until I do run out of assets, and I ask for donations once a month, and this is not the month. So please do not send donations this month, November. If you want to donate and keep the magic bus going and keep me strapped to the helm of a ship that never seems to quit, that's when you donate. That's it.
Nice. I wanted to say, with what you're covering there for a minute, there's a phrase that we tend to use in this show fairly often when we're talking about game, various different things that happen in Eve and other kind of things, is correlation is not causation. It's a very apt thing to have in your head at all times. And if people are kind of a little confused as to when you said, I was on the first CSM 3, it's because CSM 2 and CSM 1 were not voted by players. They were all picked by CCP.
Which they're starting to swing back to. It's an interesting pendulum in that this election, there are 10 people being elected. Some of us here are running for your votes. But after the votes are all tallied, CCP has said they are going to pick 2 people from the, I believe, and you guys are welcome to correct me, 11 to 20th spots, just to fill holes. To fill holes that are existing, or they may say, we're definitely going to be doing Pochven this year, and the damn Pochven candidate didn't get elected. Let's bring them in. Or we're still not getting enough newbies. Bring Mike in, even if he didn't get elected.
Yeah, something along those lines, but we definitely will cover that for sure.
Yeah, we will come back to that. But I think it's time for Yondu. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah.
Sure. So I'm the newest probably to the Eve from all the CSM candidates. I started in 2017. And I started very small in the Amar Highsec. I was mining Veldspar and was sort of always being ganked. So I decided to find a home, which a friend of mine recommended me would be good to join Brave Newbies. And that was in the time when Brave Newbies were basically in the Catch 2-0, just establishing themselves there, getting also nuked by PL, and clearing the areas from the Circle of Two back then in Impasse. So I started like doing small industry scale operations there, which in a few months decided to be like, let's do capitals, right? So we established a small capital corporation. We started building some caps, which ended up building Titans in half a year of my gameplay, actually. And it ended up sort of building up the backbone for the Brave with the caps and supers in 2018 when the Rogues were still valid tool in the game. And then I decided to basically up my game, and with being sort of bored, I decided to build Keepstars, and one of which then ended up being the Keepstar that nearly destroyed Delve.
That was the one that ended up being dropped with the bubble wrap, right?
Yeah, the YZ9 one. It ended up destroying Tez instead, so we're friends now, right?
I mean, there has always been a kind of open invitation to Brave by the Imperium, right? Apparently, you just finally decided to accept it. But
I have to ask, Yondu, did you arrive by the first part of your name in the sense of like, oh, I should really amalgamate Yoda and Windu into a single name?
No, I just basically went, like 2017 was when the Guardians of Galaxy aired on the cinemas.
Oh, yes. Okay, yeah.
So I decided to poach the name or privatize the name.
That's fair.
I just want to point out that, like, I even dropped Mary Poppins and Max.
Seriously, like, how does it?
I still didn't get it. I still didn't get it. No, yeah. I mean, you know, I'm.
He's Mary Poppins.
I don't watch too much like Marvel films, but yeah, I should have got that. That's fair.
But I think Mike already touched on the first topic expertly, way ahead of the time. So why don't we talk a bit about the newest change in the CSM, that CCP is now adding 2 spots that are handpicked by CCP from the candidates placing in between 11th and 20th place that will obviously not make it into the top 10. What are your thoughts on that?
Can I speak up first on that one?
I mean, you already have.
Yeah. There's 2 things. One, for CSM, oh God, I lose track, 15, technically, I wasn't actually elected. I was just the last man standing. I did not accumulate enough votes to break the barrier. It's just everyone else had been eliminated, and there were only 10 seats, and I was the last of the 10 standing, so to speak. So I got in without actually being elected. So this single transferable vote has some interesting quirks to it. But
I mean, hey,
like
if you're the last one, if you're on a seat when the music stops, then you're good.
Yeah, that's what it was. It was musical chairs, and it was a scary thing to be sitting there watching, because they don't tell you ahead of time you're in. We're just going to televise it later. I find out the same time you guys find out. But the funny thing is that there are arguments against this and arguments for it. The arguments against it is CCP can now play favorites. So if they have masters who didn't get, if Goon Swarm was supposed to get in and somehow didn't manage to get their guy in, now CCP can, cherry pick them and bring them right out and make sure that the masters do show up. Tinfoil hats are available in the lobby on the way out. On the other hand, like I said, if they have a specific thing that they want to address this year and they don't have the matter expert didn't manage to get elected. And this really applies to the groups that historically have trouble electing somebody. That's HiSec, Pochven, Wormholes, and sometimes LowSec, because those guys just can't get their shit together to actually get enough votes behind one candidate. They don't organize. NullSec alliances manage to always get at least their first 1 or 2 people, and they do horse trading and say, we'll put your guy on our ballot if you put our guy on your ballot. And if you watch any of the elections, the nullsec people kind of get onto seats first, and it's just up to us independents to manage to, like you said, still be sitting in a chair when the music stops. So I think it'll be very interesting and almost a predictor of the future if we take a look to see what and who they pick for those 2 seats. That will give you a hint as to what is coming in the next year or the next year or 2. Because quite often you work really hard on something with CCP and it doesn't even show up till you're bloody out of office and sitting in the sidelines, but you're going, I did that. I worked hard on that damn thing.
Yeah, definitely. Gideon, how are you feeling about this change?
I think it's necessary with the meta changes that have happened in the last few years, I would say. If you look at the member counts of the big nullsec alliances like Goonswarm, Fraternity, and Horde are all accumulating 30,000 characters. Let's just assume they have the same percentage of Omega accounts. You're looking at massive voter blocks that will not just get their first candidate in, but they will get their first, second, and maybe even third candidate in, just by trickling down the vote and splitting it up in different slots. So there isn't then that much left if you have these 3 blocks voting in a unified vote, maybe Brave getting another one in. Then you're looking at 8 to 10 seats that are already pretty much in the hands of these blocks. And then if we want to have a peer group that talks about all of EVE, we should have some input from all of EVE, or at least if CCP decides to work on maybe Podschwan, wormholes, or anything, they should have a voice from these spaces. And this allows CCP to get these voices into the CSM, even if they might not be elected, but they might already be the biggest supporter for their part of space, right? Because they only pick one out of the 11th to 20th vote. So we are not talking about some random character that just spawns. We are talking about somebody that also accumulated votes from the players. So with that bottom line in there as well, it will not be some person that nobody has elected. It will be somebody that CCP thinks is the best for their development cycle that they are expecting, and it will be someone that is also respected by his respective peers.
I mean that is the what I would consider to be the best case scenario, as it were.
I don't think CCP wants to ruin their own CSM. Like they want to keep that legitimate, right? And I think, as much as I rail on other CSMs, but they are as strong enough people to also see the bigger picture and look at the slots. And I think they would voice their opinions if CCP would pick candidates that are also part of the nullsec blocks when there's already 8 people being represented there. So they would much rather voice their opinions for somebody that really adds something to the CSM as a whole.
Yondu, do you agree, or do you think this will put a lot of pressure on the 2 people who get handpicked?
I mean, sort of, there's this ballot thing that's been going on for ages now, that we basically know who the first 6 will be, probably, let's say. And yes, there is like underrepresentation of those independents that are not there. But currently, if you also look into the candidates, you have most of them are PvP, Podschwan oriented, right? There's like 40 of them that have that tag on the thread. So there is a lot of them, which means there is currently like also the underrepresentations of my topic, like industry, for example. There's me, there's Angry Mustache, there is Oz for Markets, and that's about all. So, I mean, it's an interesting idea to add 2 more, which will be handpicked by CCP, so that, I don't know, the CSM wouldn't end up talking all year about which slot to remove on the Ishtar or stuff like that. But it really depends on what these 2 spaces are for, if it is for the basically on the topic, or if it's for the person from, I don't know, LowSec, person from Wormhole. If they're deciding based on that, you're voted between 11 to 20 place, but is it based on your expertise, as they say, or is it based on your background, right? Because for me, I may have the tag Brave Collective, but I want to represent industry side for the CSM. But industry is like regardless where you are, if you're in old block, if you're low sec, if you're high sec, if you're in a wormhole, or if you're in a Postman, there is still some industry there that crosses this border, and I'm feeling free here to represent all those topics here and the players that are in these areas. So I'm very open to any idea that will improve the industry game.
I want to add on, that's an excellent point that Yondu made. It's not just where you live, but it's how you play, or what game you're playing in EVE. You know, the old joke, EVE is not a game, it's a bunch of games in a trench coat pretending to be one game. So Yondu's right. And instead of saying, where do you live? Are you industry? Are you market? Are you PvE, PvP? What style? Are you a ganker, or are you an anti-ganker, or whatever? So there's lots of different ways we divide ourselves into tribes. And he's right. He's brave, but he's also an industrialist. He's also, you know, we all have a lot of hats, and it's how are you dividing us up? How are you figuring out who goes left and who goes right?
I want to push back on one thing that he said, though, that a lot of people are PvPers, and that is their main goal. As I've been in leadership positions or semi-leadership positions in all the alliances I've been part of, and I've been in Legacy or Evictus or TRC, respectively, FCs usually know what happens in the industry because they need the ships in a certain location to run their fleets. So we know what happens in the industry, and we usually have industrials we talk to get the ships to a certain space. It's not that we are oblivious to what happens in the industry realm as well. So you would be surprised how much industry, like leaders of like head FCs of alliances usually know a lot about industry and about the inner workings, more than people would expect.
I would disagree here, because like I haven't been in the alliance leadership because I consider myself
depends on the alliance, I guess.
Yeah. But like the FCs basically say, I wanted these 100 Feroxes yesterday, right, and stuff like that. So there is like inherent time that things can be built or cannot be built, or in the space that can be built. For example, now we weld 5 trillion of dreadnoughts, and suddenly we found out that there is a missing part that you cannot build caps with, which is the ENS, like small part that drops from the goat size, and it just doesn't add up now for anyone.
I mean, honestly, like at this point in you know in the year, who would be wanting dreadnoughts? Who among us would probably not have as many dreadnoughts as they did previously have maybe a week or so ago? Like I don't know.
Yeah, it depends on the alliance, right?
Mm-hmm.
Brave never had caps.
It also depends on which area of space you're working with, right? I guess you will.
Yeah.
We just looked at a dread fight that had hundreds of dreads involved at the same time, in the same time frame. A week ago, we had dread fights in Scalding Pass that had 10 to 15, and there your own dread makes a huge difference if you drop it or not. Funnily enough, for my corporation, I acquired some dreads so we can use them in that area if we find an opening, and we have used them there before. And I've never had dreads before while I was in Nalsec, so. It really depends at what stage you're in and if you want to use dreads or not.
And do you think that now that the sort of like economic taps have been turned on a little bit more since the era of scarcity, we're now suddenly getting a bunch more cap fights and that kind of thing going on. Like, do you think that there could be some kind of connection between that one and the other? Perhaps.
I kind of disagree. I think the reason why the dread fight happened right now is just an accumulation of power, and one FC finally pulling the trigger, and that led to an escalation, and everybody wants to get involved. Would there have been more dreads dropped if we still had the Rockwell output? Potentially, because capitals were the only answer in that era, but I don't think that was a healthy meta as a whole, because capitals kept oppressing the subcap meta as a whole, especially with high application on carriers and fax wrapping stackable and all that stuff. So CCP has done a lot of changes during that era, and we could discuss each of these changes individually. I think there were some misguided and some really, really good ones. We can pick two out. For example, let's take the removing of the big ore chunks out of nullsec, like making them smaller, and then at the same time they nerf the rock wall itself. Both of these changes had massive industry implications, but at the same time, would have been one of these changes not good enough to fix the problems that rock walls provided. If all of these combined changes had some negative effects for sure. But I certainly do not want the return to rock walls online. I just put one example. I just put out one example why that was a toxic meta, from my opinion. I had people in my alliance multi-boxing rock walls, building T1 battleships or T1 capitals, max insuring them and self-destructing them, because that was faster ISK per hour than ratting in a super. So if the mining department is the best way to make ISK because rock walls were so multi-boxable, then it shows you that there is something fundamentally broken with that mechanic. So
it was seriously broken. Like, I don't even consider myself a miner in any way, shape, or form when it comes to sort of, you know, money making in Eve. And even I had like 4 at one particular time, right? Like 4 rock walls, which is just like when you consider you don't really consider yourself a miner, even if you had 4 rock walls at that particular point in time. That's ludicrous. But then again, you know, back when these changes were coming about, like, you know, the CSM, which at the time which I mean, most CSMs are fairly heavily null kind of centric, as it were. I mean, the CSM were basically telling CCP that, like, this is broken, this will not end well, and CCP basically just turned around and said, like, if it happens, then we'll adjust.
Which
they didn't adjust. It took them forever to adjust, and so, like, one of those sort of things is, like, you know, if that scenario happens with you being on the CSM, like, you know, how would you go about, like, describing to CCP how big a problem something could end up becoming?
Well, I can answer that one because I've seen it happen more than once in the years I've been in the CSM, all the way back to CSM 8. Minna, who was the goon rep that year, was told a change, and he said, if you do this, we will exploit the shit out of it, and you won't be able to stop us, and it will take a while for you to backpedal from it. This is a bad idea. And they went, oh, you're just overstating your case. So they promptly did what Minna told them not to do, and the goons made mint on that one. For the life of me, I can't remember what the change was, but this is not something that just happened with Rorquals. This is something that happens over and over and over again. And CCP occasionally ignores, for some reason, the nullsec people, when they say we have the manpower to figure out the hole and exploit the hell out of it, you should consider this carefully. And that doesn't stop us from warning them. It just means that CCP has to get burned on a regular basis to remind themselves that the oven is hot.
I'm going to take exception with one thing you said there, Mike. You said that CCP occasionally ignores when nullsec says this. CCP always ignores when nullsec says this. We can go back through the forum logs showing basically every major change that's blown up in their faces being warned. If you do this, here's how we will play it out. And then exactly that happens, and they act shocked every goddamn time.
That's fair. There's a few things they've listened to us, but I'd say that the weight is more to the ignoring us than paying attention to us.
That's
and do you think
a problem of the CSM, right? The cases where they did listen to the CSM and actually did change how it worked or abandoned it completely, it's not what we hear about, right? Because it usually falls under NDAs and stuff like that. So
yeah,
I
wonder whether it's because like, you know, the CSM has always been fairly null centric. So like when the null centric groups basically say don't do this, it's broke, it'll break the game. You know, does it does CCP just kind of zone out, like, you know, in terms of like listening to the CSM and because of that particular kind of thing? And do you think if the CSM were more varied, more kind of like, you know, had more say from different areas of the game, but still in that scenario, in that situation, spoke in almost basically a singular voice of like, don't do this, it'll break the game, whether that would actually change CCP to listen, or do you think they'll still do the whole kind of, you know, blinkers on and just carry on regardless? Gideon, how do you feel about that?
To some regards, CCP has to sometimes ignore the CSM. Sometimes they have to ignore the voices because they are developing a game. They have a cycle they want to go through. They might put some feedback in there. And if you have 8 to 9 people, like we said, coming from nullsec and they are railing against something, and it might be something that the CCP wants to do to give other parts of space some breathing room, they might want to ignore these 8 to 10 voices there because they might assume some nefarious campaigning for their own space without regards to the overall health of the game.
Yeah.
So I can see why they might ignore some voices, but obviously there were some mistakes being done in the past that should have been obvious if somebody took a step back. And but you touched on a bigger issue as a whole. I would say it isn't just industry or some balance patches that they did. It's the glacial repetition on features that they introduce and how long it takes to change stuff that they did. We had the Bunin meta for 4.5 years in the PvP space. This didn't have to be that long. Like, it really didn't have to be that long. Yeah. And we are still not even out of it. Like, the Bunin is still a very, very competitive ship.
Yeah, and prior to that, we had the Railgoo kind of meta as well, like prior to that. Yeah. So like, and that lasted a good long while as well. So like, you know,
but then we had era in the
they don't change things.
Then we had the era of T3Cs for a very long time when resistances, you could stack them to crazy amounts if you put in the ISK, and low-stack alliances did it, and you just had T3Cs going around and killing stuff. So there needs to be a faster development cycle in that regard as a whole, I would say.
Like you said, it's the same as a glacier. Large corporations, large objects don't turn easily. You know, and so once they're on a path, it's really hard for them to say whoops and turn, because it has to go through a whole bunch of iterations. Look how long Blackout lasted, and that was one of their fastest pivots ever.
Now, do you think that like just real quickly, do you think that like having a specialist in certain areas like would help in terms of like getting the message like through to CCP? You know, like Yondu, you're a specialist when it comes to sort of like building. Like if there was like an inherent issue with building, with like, you know, the production side of Eve that CCP were going to be introducing, do you think that the fact that you have a very, very in-depth like knowledge of that, you'd be able to, you know, convey that to CCP in a way that would actually have them listen?
Well, that depends on if they are willing to listen, and what I see for the past 2 years, they have been listening, because you have new stuff coming into the game rather than removed. Depends how the speed of these things is being added or removed, yes, but I have not been on the CSM before. I don't know what size of their development team is, right? I do not know how fast they are working, why they are working slow. They certainly have their processes set up in some way. So if you have an idea for them, you feel free to say it, I guess. But at the end, they are the developer. But it should also be like not presenting just any idea, because they're selling the product, and they would want to sell the more product to the more customers, right? So if you have idea that would, let's say, improve the game of one person, but 100% would log out from the game, that's probably one thing to note also. But if you would have removed a function for that one person and 100 people log back in, that's another interesting thing there. So I think they would listen for things that would bring people in, and I probably they will have some other OPSEC information why it wouldn't work, why they don't want to work. For example, why, as we mentioned, why do they not want to have more asteroid belts, right? Mm-hmm. Because you could balance it with more things to build and destroy. It's just that they did the Thanos move. They removed all of the sources, right?
To add on to what you're asking, McLeod, there's 2 points I want to make. One is that a real expert, like Yondu or like Kenneth Feld, for example, when they get in and prove their worth by just really knowing their shit, the CCP does listen to them, and actually they wind up having a good relationship with the specific devs on that line. So Kenneth was having a lot of private conversations with specific devs all the way through CSM 15 and 16. Just because he knew the numbers better than the rest of us. He knew his stuff inside out and backwards. So he became a respected CSM and listened to because he had proven his worth and proven his knowledge. The other thing, and another CCP person who's not CSM person not running this year is Brisk. Now, Brisk was listened to for a different reason. Brisk was listened to because he is a very convincing and good speaker. He knows how to make a point. He knows how to talk to groups of people, and he knows how to get his message across in a way that is listened to. And so that is another good CSM to elect, is somebody who may not be the pro from Dover for knowing everything about the subject, but leastwise when he talks, people damn well listen, as opposed to go off and pour a coffee and come back and peek in to see if he's still talking.
I guess you have to combine both to be very, very effective. You need somebody that has knowledge, and you need somebody that is able to present that knowledge in a way that people are willing to listen. If you are obnoxious and nobody wants to listen to you, and you can say the best things and people will just not listen to you or take your advice. So it should be somebody that has knowledge, and it should be somebody that is able to get that knowledge across. It's like a good teacher, right?
Conveying the importance of what you're trying to say to somebody who may not realize it at that particular point in time, it is a very key skill when it comes to the CSM. Like,
I want to push back on something that Judith said. They removed all the materials. They removed some materials now from NullSec and distributed them around space. And now the market adjusts to the value of these materials depending on how dangerous it is to mine these materials. Isogen is low-sec dependent, so Isogen is expensive right now because less people mine in low-sec or in the Isogen belts that have been added now. That doesn't mean that the material is just gone. It's a bottleneck that was created so that these areas of space have economic value. I dislike the framing of saying they just removed everything. If they just removed it out of NullSec into other areas of space that now have an industry point that makes them interesting for industry people to live in. Like that framing of they just removed it is, I think, misguided at this point in time. It might have been true 2 to 3 years ago when they were very heavy-handed on the scarcity, but they have re-added stuff, especially the new Isogen belts in low-sec adjacent null-sec is areas where you can get your materials back.
Okay.
Just like I said, I've seasoned all the industry stuff as well.
I believe, most of the nullsec industry and nullsec alliances were built on spodumine, right? And they decided back then that it is time to remove spodumine from the game, to call it something else, to put minerals somewhere else. Think like that is already done when you had 1,000 Titans in Imperium, 1,000 Titans in Horde, 1,000 Titans in Pandemic Legion, so a bit too late probably. But currently, you still have those caps about, so you still have probably, 10,000 dreads from 2018 when they were cheap. And it's not like they're coming back, it's just that currently it's more expensive to build them. If you could build a fax for 700 mil back then, you will build it for 5.5 mil. But this will be a hateful thing to say, but I was sort of fan of those rogue dads who would want to just chill on the rock, right? After the day of work. It is a valid gameplay for me, I never minded Rogue, but I understood that gameplay was valid for the people, that they wanted to make some chill gaming time. And then there were the people that hunted them. So it's something that still is possible, but it's not also available or so available, right? Because now you use a Oracle for boosting barges, but you can do it in a porpoise. So
yeah, and sorry, go for it, Yundu.
Fine.
I was just going to say, because it's it's taking Rorquals back to the sort of like essentially what they used to do, boosting, but like obviously previously boosting was done just in a pause. But now that you've got porpoises, like, do you really need it? I'm not sure.
Not really, but if you look at
the one thing that went missing with Rorquals that I think is bad for the metagame is sort of a thing that you can attack right away and you get a response. So it was a content driver in that sense. That has not been replaced.
Really was.
That's why that there needs to be something back in the game that is a conflict driver. But in my opinion, as you stated, somebody going back home, going out and making ISK is not a problem for me at all. Like, that play needs to exist. The big problem with Rorquals, in my opinion, was that were super safe, super low input, and they were the best way of making ISK. Yeah. If somebody goes out and goes to a calm activity that you can multi-box to a certain degree, it should not be the best way to make ISK. It should be one way to make ISK. And that was one of the problems, not the only one, but one of the problems with the old meta in that regard, that it was the best way to make ISK. The active task or very active task should be that.
When you say, when you talk about them being super safe, you're talking about the capabilities of the ship itself with all of the EHP it's got, the multiple ancillary shield boosters, the panic mode, or are you talking about multiple other
I think the panic mode was the best.
Defenses?
The panic was super strong because it gave you time to move a Sino, open a Sino, and then you have the whole response fleet ready. And this is one of the reasons why I think the Rockwell meta especially was super toxic, because it required having an umbrella to use the best income source within the game. That means these income sources and these big industry faucets were exclusive to alliances that could provide these umbrellas. It was super hard for somebody who did not have the umbrella to keep members in your alliance if these members could just join a block, get a Rockwell into the block, and just get the Rockwell game going and make so much more ISK than a mining barge somewhere else. This is now somewhat of a more level playing field, right? Because you have a boosting ship that is often, even in the normal blocks, use a porpoise, and you have barges that can warp off. So they can operate in low sec, null sec, in smaller alliances. So there's more of a level playing field between the one industrial character in a null block and the one industrial character that is not within a null block.
Okay. And so one of the things which was kind of funny, just really quickly, as a point with regards to the panic module, right? Like, when CCP kind of created or put together the panic module for the game, like the idea that they had, at least in their head, was that Rorqual pilots would hit this panic module as soon as hostiles hit the grid, because they would be essentially the large sort of mother fish in that like particular asteroid field, with a whole bunch of barges there as well mining. And the idea was that the panic module would actually, make the barges around them as well invulnerable to damage. Obviously, if you're in a 2, 3, 4, sometimes 5 or more billion ISK, Rorqual, and you have a bunch of sub 10 millions, maybe sub 50 million ISK barges around, are you going to be hitting that panic module early? No, you're going to be hitting that panic module as late as you can, because you need to extend the amount of time that your group has.
That's not the main part, I would say.
So that's
not the main part.
What I'm saying is, like, CCP's idea for how the panic module would be utilized by players was completely ass backwards.
You also forget about one part. The Rockwell was also the best mining ship, right? So you didn't even have barges in the belts.
Yeah,
you just warp Rockwells in and you be done with it. Why would you have barges in if you can just get another Rockwell that you can just print out because you're mining so many materials that you can just build a new one? So why would you even bother going into much more complicated T2 industry for hulks or similar stuff that needs invention and invention time if you can just use the Rockwell to print another one and to print so many more that you can just keep printing them. And we really don't need to go back into that era. Really, we don't need
want
that.
to stop you there, but I kind of do. I did threaten you to bring you back on track, so that's me intervening here.
Intervention.
You did just spend half an hour talking about something that used to be a big issue at EVE. So why don't we talk about what you think is the biggest issue the game is facing right now? Yondu, why don't you start?
Good call.
Let's say in industry, because that's where I'm at. It's currently like we still have the caps that we have from the past, right? So it's the problem of replacing caps, but if they need to be replaced or as such, if you would lose, let's say, 100 Titans right now, that would hurt a bit, right? But for example, like the CCP did the change to caps, to components, to how they are built, how the structure of materials is in now, but they haven't even touched the citadels. So for example, now you have a, let's say, 200 bill Titan, but the Keepstar costs 140 bill to build. So the thing is that, yes, this was some balance there, but I don't think there has been much looked on the Citadel side currently.
I mean, that is true. Like, you know, as a large kind of nullsec force, like when the Imperium comes through and, like, you know, knocks down a Keepstar, like it's not it may seem like a fairly significant kind of fight to be able to do that, but like in the grand scheme of things, it's not really that much of an issue because, like, you know, to put a Keepstar back up, it doesn't exactly cost that much, like from especially, you know, for null groups.
Yeah. And what I'm trying to also think about is, like, could there be anything between the Fortisar and Keepstar for this defense structure? Because you have, let's say, 10 bill Fortisar, but you have 140, 50 bill Keepstar. So could there be a M2L structure that could, like, medium-sized castle that you could drop somewhere? Or if you would make the Keepstar more expensive, or if you would make the Fortisar more expensive. Because currently we have, like, instead of forts we are using Asbels to drop. Instead of Asbels we are using Sotios. If we want to use nothing more expensive than a Keepstar. So there is something missing there that probably should be addressed in the game for the structures, as you can print, I don't know. And back in Catch, we used to be harassed by simple farmers who used to put 100 to 100 right arrows in a system, and it was cheap doing, right? So there is sort of, yes, there has been address of how you can kill that stuff like that right now, because you have the open vulnerability timers for shield and stuff, but there hasn't been anything done on the industry side to make it more difficult for the structures to be available in game. And that can be good ISK sync as well for the game, if you are considering that, yes, there is a lot of minerals still there. You can remove it by just putting it into the blueprint.
I mean, there are definitely other areas of, you know, citadels that, like, I have my particular issue with. The fact that they're fairly easy to produce, yeah, and the fact that we just, like, essentially go for the largest one that we can that you can afford to drop. The other kind of thing is it also depends entirely on, like, you know, what ships can actually be docked in there, and a lot of the times, you know, depending on what a lot of the times nullsec kind of groups, you know, ideally want to drop something that you can dock caps in, right? And that's like the absolute base, like, you know, lowest level that would be that we would consider dropping, right?
right? But also to balance this, I would say, why are we still having missiles on these structures, right? They're not too much worth. Why should we not have like turrets, for example, or lasers on them to have better defense capabilities if we would go there and make the effort to make them more expensive?
I mean, also, and I know I'm sort of talking sort of with regards to how the servers used to perform with missiles, but like missiles were always one of those types, like weapon types that always used to affect the server performance much more negatively than other weapon systems. I'm not entirely certain how well. Yeah, exactly. There's a lot more. There's a lot more calculations, a lot more kind of going on with missiles that you have to kind of calculate.
More entities on the grid.
Yeah, exactly, and that affects server performance. So like, it almost makes sense that like that Citadel shouldn't be using missiles. That they should have gun platforms rather than
artillery, like a castle, something like that.
At the same time, we see that from people that talk about ecosystem health. Defenses of citadels are very, very powerful at the moment, especially for the low cost as you've introduced. And there has been some content gun missing because of the introduction of citadels. Station grids were rife with PvP in the past because you could entoast modules, take the repair module away, take services away. Nothing like this exists for the citadels. At the same time, if you stay on that grid, the Citadel can scram you, ECM you, shoot you, paint you. The list is basically endless. The neutralizers are very, very powerful. I don't know where you're coming from, but Citadels are super, super powerful, especially for the cost that they have in their defenses. I don't know where your argument is coming from, saying that I don't know why they have missiles or turrets, because they basically have all the tools that you can wish for.
They do if you have people to man the structure and the fleet with it.
Yeah, good. What's the problem? Somebody needs to be active for defense to be active.
Yes, but let's say that you have a group of high-sec Wardakers that are attacking your structure. You're a solo builder. You have your own Sotillo, right? What is your defense there?
But a single person doesn't need a Sotillo, and if he wants to drop a Sotillo, he should have a support group that makes it possible for him to keep that Sotillo.
It's a gameplay.
What are you complaining about?
Well, the thing is when it comes to sort of like, you know, what a person should drop and what a person does drop, it is kind of immaterial. It's whether they can drop it and whether they feel confident about defending it, whether they can do it themselves or whether they need a group for it. If they can defend it themselves, then they'll drop it themselves.
And how strong do you want to make?
I think there's also a fundamental disconnect between the two of you on this one, where one of you is saying, oh, Citadels just don't have enough defenses, and the other is saying Citadels are just incredibly strong on defense. And honestly, once the attacking group hits a certain critical mass, the Citadel is going to die. I don't care what it is. That only impacts what that critical mass needs to be. But yeah. Once you get there, the Citadel is dead. I don't care what you have on defenses for it. The simple fact that it can't run away and there's only one of it means it's going to die.
Yeah, you called out high-sec Wardakers. Yeah, then they just add 5 more ships and then they're good again if you increase the defenses. But you have very, very negative effects on other parts of the ecosystem because the defenses are there for other parts of space as well. So
yeah, I think the beginning of that conversation kind of stemmed from it's high server cost, right, to run missiles. Why not have other things? And if you're going to have those other things, you can make them more expensive. I think there was some of that in the beginning of that conversation, more so than they can't really defend themselves, right?
That was not his argument. The McLeod brought the server performance in. His argument was that the defenses are too weak, and why shouldn't there be turrets? And he wanted missiles. I will take my track record of seeing in PvP that isn't that
I want a variety game for defense for the Citadels. That's all. Why can we not choose to have different defense type mechanisms on Citadels? That's my thing.
Yes, you can argue that, yeah, but you also said they were weak. We can look that back. It doesn't matter, right? We can gloss over that. I just wanted to intercept that. They are not weak.
Imagine a Fortizar. Try to kill a simple saber with a Fortizar without the use of fighters. I dare you. you will not do that. So how do you want to prevent? How do you want to prevent, let's say, fleet of Macarials doing that? If you have fleet of
Macarials should kill a Fortizar. Like that's the point. That's what fleets are for.
No, you should have some defense there. If somebody is trying to kill
ships of your own
structures.
Ships of your own.
Imagine
the Fortizar has a supporting factor. It has ECM, it has bombs, it has neutralizers. It can.
And it does nothing.
It has fighters.
Does nothing to the fleet.
It's super
the
powerful.
Bombs. Yeah, they are a fairly decent deterrent for large groups and stuff like that. But like the other kind of thing is bombs only really function in nullsec and
with their AOE neutralizers that people only run Macarial fleets because they could deal with it. Like I don't know where you're coming from, mate.
Any artillery fleet with an armor tank doesn't care about the neutralizers.
Yeah, but they were so strong that those ships exclusively were used. That shows you how powerful that module is.
Or it shows you that there's a tool for every application.
Yeah, exactly. But then it's again to my argument. If they come with a Macarial fleet, then bring an anti-Macarial fleet of your own and defend your structure and have actual people defending your structure instead of one mechanic defending your complete structure. Like, what is your argument? Would you remove a Fortizar if you couldn't do it with a Macarial fleet? Like, how do you think small gang or medium-sized groups would remove a Fortizar at that point? What is your idea?
My idea is to have also the support role of a Fortizar doing anything to the fleet that is attacking it.
Well, it does.
Right
I need to stop this argument as probably the only block FC in the room. A Fortizar is already a very powerful support role for any fleet in terms of defense. In order to attack a Fortizar or even a Keepstar, you need very specialized fleets to deal with it, right? Even if we're talking about just dropping caps and supers and titans, you still need to adapt to the capabilities of the Keepstar or the Fortizar, right? You can't just use your regular fittings, and that will also change how you can deal with the other fleets on grid that are gonna shoot you, right? But that's the deal. You can't expect a single structure to defend itself against an entire fleet of enemies, right? That's just not balanced.
Yeah, the only tools that really kind of help that in some way, shape, or form are bomb launchers. But like even then, it's as anybody who has been on a fleet where a defensive fleet hasn't actually formed, and you're literally just in there shooting a structure that has like one gunner lobbing bombs at you, like it is basically ineffective.
But we've come from
it's a bit of a pain, but that's it.
From a very different topic to this, so. Let's change back.
Yeah.
And since Gideon was already talking, Gideon, what do you think is the biggest problem the game is facing?
It's a duality of two things. It's power projection and, especially for nullsec, risk and reward are not in line. Like I said earlier, the biggest income sources should involve some risk and some activity. One of the biggest income sources at the moment is Abyssal running in highsec T5s, T6s, and people chain run them, and it completely beats active retting or any active activity you could do in nullsec income-wise. So the people that min-max their gameplay remove themselves out of the sandbox in really, really safe space that is protected by the game itself. I think there has been a shift in risk and reward. So there needs to be a higher reward for people doing activity in nullsec. And these incomes need to be higher than what they currently are in nullsec. But in combination of that, there needs to be some limiting factor to power projection. And I would call out NC-plexes here because they are ridiculously powerful tools. I know you had that discussion last week. We can dip into that again if you want, but I think...
Were you clawing at the bit? Like, were you clawing at the bit last week, kind of going, let me on there, I need to talk about this?
I've talked about this extensively. There's a Reddit post that I made that had all FCs, a lot of FCs co-signing. It started with me with desync at that time. I just shifted from TRC, so small gang to medium-sized FC. to Noreos co-signed this. This is the fraternity leader. So we're talking about people that are agreeing on that draft that I made on Reddit, from the smallest gang FCs to the highest scale. And especially, and this is something that I recognized when making the draft, a lot of medium-sized FCs were very, 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 very concerned about the state of projection that is provided by NC Plexus. If you look in that post, I would have to put it up again. I think 3 of the people that co-signed were in Rote Capella, which used to live in Tribute, and they are no longer within Nullsec. They moved completely out of Nullsec into Pochran. And if you think about the map, there is no group that is similar to Rote Capella or Trigger Happy or these group Triumvirate that used to exist, that live in a space that they clawed out on their own. The only alliances that now have SOF, Triumvirate, I just mentioned them, live in the south on a very, very fragile agreement between, I think it's Initiative and Horde, that they are not interfering in the south at all, and they want to keep that for that space for medium alliances. And I think it already tells you something about the health of the meta game as a whole, if big groups remain in Nullsec and the medium groups remove themselves, unless there is an agreement that the big groups don't turbo project to them all the time. So I think power projection and null income would be, I think, risk and reward in general would be massive.
So there is an underlying thing that basically powers that entire aspect. Whether you guys can figure out what that particular part of the game is, I don't know. I kind of have it in my head, but like I'm not going to tell you. It's up to you to figure it out. But I would like to say, Gideon, with regards to the power projection kind of discussion, right? Do you feel that there should be a home field advantage to owning and upgrading your space?
There always is a home field advantage if somebody does an incursion into your space, because I know your ship types and I can counter ship you. And that is a super strong home field advantage. If I know you bring a ship doctrine in that struggles with tracking, I can bring smaller hulls that you won't be able to track, take down your tracking help, and grind down your fleet with a small size. So there's a massive advantage at that end.
That's based on perfect intel, right? So that is based on you knowing exactly what your hostiles are bringing, exactly what their fitting is, etc., etc. And I understand that there are obviously ways of being able to sort of tell what people's fits are and stuff like that. But the point that you're making is with relation to you knowing exactly what the hostiles are bringing, that they don't have any kind of thing, that they're not playing some kind of like cloak and daggery kind of game, or have like some like force or whatever in a wormhole ready to come in, that kind of stuff. Like you're basing this on perfect intel at this point in time, right?
It's not just perfect intel. Like, we all know there are spies in other groups. You can get a D-scan from their staging. You see what they have on a Titan. You see what they move, especially in the bigger scale. That's pretty normal that you have at least a good idea what people are bringing before the fight actually starts.
I know that, but like I've also been in alliances where they've sprung things, like the leadership and the FCs have sprung things on us, the line members, that even we didn't know about. Like, the whole taking of Rage. Like, we had no idea what we were doing up until the point where we actually landed in Rage. Like, so there's
people knew what was happening.
Exactly. So there is having perfect intel by basically saying because spies, and then there's actually truly knowing and having.
But isn't Rage the perfect example that if people put in effort, you don't need massive projection, you don't need to massively move forces instantly, and you don't need to move heavy ships instantly. If a dedicated group is there to move assets into a certain location and they take their time and they take their effort, they can write beautiful stories. And in the end, writing your own stories. Like,
I don't.
Yeah, it only took a year.
I don't think Rage should stand as an example of the kind of gameplay we expect.
No.
Really, no.
Exactly. Like that's another point I wanted to make.
Everything you want to do is okay. So I'll see you in a year.
But
exactly.
I completely agree, right? That's what I want to point out. Like, we have this one point in Rage, but this is a beautiful example of a limited group of people putting in massive effort to get something done, because there were logistics restrictions that made it very hard to do it just by the press of the button. At the same time, we have massive battles that massively outnumber the people on grid. Nobody talks about, because we all know in the end it wasn't that much effort. It was putting in a ping, getting the fleet together, or getting the multiple fleets together, taking 5 NC-plexes to your opponent and shooting a little bit, and then leaving again. And that doesn't write stories, because the effort is like, the more the effort is on the getting something done, the more we marvel at the effort that was put into it, right? And that's why Rage is such an amazing story, and some of these fights will never reach the same degree.
But I'd say that the effort is still there. It's just shared with a lot more people. Like, this is the thing. I don't think anybody could say, like, you know, oh, getting 250, you know, also kind of people into a fleet is easy. I think there's a lot of aspiring FCs out there who would say that it's not easy. But like, when you have like that support network as an FC that extends through so many different levels in your group, in your alliance, like, you know, that effort is shared. And so, you know, what may just seem like a ping here and there, and then, like, you know, somebody putting together a fleet with you know, with like, you know, one of their fleet presets.
I'm talking about
may seem easy, but it's actually like, it's a lot of effort from a lot of different people. Yeah,
I'm talking about a different effort here.
It's still there, though, Gideon. Like, you still have the people putting fuel into the NC-Plex, so that it doesn't just run out when some FC tries to shot 5 fleets through it.
You have to agree, right? It's massively more effort to get freighters into a wormhole, to get the Ravens in there, and doing that over a year and keeping these accounts there just to get attacking doctrine in. It's a much more effort than maintaining fuel in a jump bridge.
I am aware. I was one of the FCs during Rage.
Yeah.
So
I'm gonna say that.
Agreed.
That Rage.
We're not disagreeing here.
More effort than fueling a jump bridge, but Rage was, as has been said, maybe a dozen people moving 1 to 2 characters at a time, and then shutting those logins down for a year, or 8 months, or 6 months, whereas fueling a jump bridge network is constant effort by a number of people all the damn time.
Yeah, but it's shared between many people, as you well point out. And I'm talking about different kinds of effort. I'm talking about different kinds of effort. Getting something, pigging, and getting to a location, and getting that location, getting the fight. I'm talking about
it. That's just it, though. Saying, oh yeah, but it's shared among a lot of people. That doesn't make it fewer man hours of work. That doesn't make it less effort invested.
Right, and by the way,
that just means that you've got to. That just means that you've put in even more effort to build an organization that can distribute it that way.
And by the way, a trusted organization is a former GSOLer, right? I mean, I get it. There's a lot of coordination there. There's a lot of trust in there. I mean, it's not just, oh, hey, I'm trucking it over to this place today, right? It is making sure that everything's positioned in the right place. That you know.
Yeah, that's just it, Eric.
That's the
GSOL, for example, and I include any equivalent organization in the other blocks. All right, GSOL isn't the Amazon delivery service. GSOL is the Amazon delivery service and the Department of Transportation maintaining all the highways.
Yes, and all the bus stops, and all the supply closets, and all that. Right? It's a big deal.
And they make the trucks.
Yeah, and paying for it all.
Yeah. But I don't want to break up this beautiful conversation about effort. But I would still like to hear from Mike what he thinks the biggest issue is right now, because I think he has seen the most issues in the game from all of us here.
And perhaps been the cause of some of them. The funny thing is that you guys were focusing on specific things in nullsec, whereas I'm looking at slightly panned back the larger picture. And so Yves Mayer, the monthly economic report, often uses the term faucets and sinks, looking at the flow of ISK, the flow of materials, that sort of thing through the game. Me, I look at the flow of players. And it doesn't matter a single bloody amount if they put an Ansiplex in every null system if there's nobody going through the damn gates. It doesn't matter what citadels we build if there's nobody to man them. So my biggest issue is I picture the player population as a big bucket. The new player experience is the faucet pouring in, but there's a hell of a lot of holes in that bucket. And when we patch and when we fix Ansiplexes or when we fix house citadels, those are little holes that are causing a leak in the bucket where somebody might quit the game because of it. But if we don't have enough players flowing into the game to counterbalance the number of players flowing out of the game, then the rest of this is just rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. So my issue, the biggest issue in the game is acquiring and keeping players in the game, watching the population and making sure what we do increases the population, not just of our people, whoever you think our people are, but of the game as a whole, that it becomes an ecosystem where all the wolves aren't eating all the deer, because that doesn't work out in the end for the ecosystem. We have to make sure that everything is in balance, not just one part of the game. That's a much harder way to play it. It's a much harder thing to represent, and I can't point at something the way you guys can. What I can do is try to patch as many holes as I see, and, well, the bus helps is keep the faucet at the top end filling up the bucket and tries to keep that churn from happening. And so I work at what I'm talking about, trying to keep players in the game, trying to make the players see the game for what it is and hopefully like it and stay. The biggest issue is player numbers. Everything else is secondary.
But all the issues pinpointed are leading to a drain of player numbers, as you said, like a drop in the bucket, right? Like if the bucket doesn't have a floor because there's some mechanic that is completely unbalanced, you can put in as much water as you want. It would still be empty. And this is why some of us argue for single points, and why many people point to nullsec is because many ecosystems rely on healthy nullsec, because nullsec is where a lot of stories are written, there's where a lot of communities are residing that have the biggest player numbers and where people could be integrated in, so they stay longer. People stay longer, not because of amazing game mechanics or maybe for the graphics a little bit, because they're actually quite nice for EVE, but they are staying mostly for the communities and the communities that are being built. And like I stated earlier, in that Ncplex post, the cosigners were FCs from small gang to the highest scale in all areas of space. And especially what I recognized, the support was biggest and the fastest from medium tier alliances that completely vanished from the softmap, that are no longer interacting with the game and that removed themselves completely from the game. And that has to be something that even if you're in Goonswarm, even if you're in it or a fraternity or in Horde, I mean, the fraternity leader co-signed this Ncplex post. You should be aware and you should recognize that there is something completely unbalanced if medium tier alliances within a couple of years completely vanish from the map.
But aren't there
that
other...
might be, but you got to consider what Mike is saying here, because it's something I talked about a lot on the show as well in the past. It is not just that the people flowing out of the game are all nullsec players or all like medium gang players, right? There's also a lot of new players that come into the game, play it for a day or two or maybe 3. They play through the new player experience, and then they get hit with the realities of EVE, and they kind of decide it's not the game for them. And that's a lot more players than the ones we lose in nullsec.
But that is true for any game that we all downloaded a game, we played it for half an hour, and we dropped it because we realized what was advertised and what we were looking at.
No, it's not half an hour. It's not an hour. We are talking about them playing for days and then dropping out. And the big factor there is whether or not they join a player-run organization. if they join a player-run organization, they usually stick around a lot longer than if they just stay on their own in HiSec and just follow what CCP is handing them, right?
Yeah, but then that's again recruiting from the different organizations. Maybe I'm gonna shout out here somebody. DTM from JNN is writing a guide. He put his alt into several of the new bro corporations, for example, and he is making a guide what these corporations did well and what stuff they are not doing well. And if you are interested in a certain part of the game, that guide will lead you to some of the corporations that he had interesting experience with. And I think, like, we have Mike here, who runs the Magic School Bus. There are organizations here that lead to player interaction. And if you have a community, of course, you stay longer within a multiplayer game, especially if the main aspect of the game is building a community and making that community do stuff that matters. But I would still argue that, of course, you will always have a large influx of players, especially if you look at the last trailer, that was very good, by the way, but it suggests a different kind of game. And there could be people just joining the game, seeing the trailer, expecting a super action-packed game, and EVE is just not that. EVE is more strategic politics and then strategic decision-making in industry, right? It's not a super action-packed game per se. There are more action-packed games out there. So there will be a disconnect between people that join the game, that have expectations, and they're just not met. And they might be there for 3 days, 4 days, 5 days, 6 days, and they play the game extensively. But because they're waiting for that action-packed game, because they're just getting started and they realize maybe EVE is not that game, and they will leave, yes.
Of course, but
it's finding out why they're thinking that. Like,
you should still give new players the chance to actually experience what EVE is about, right? And the best way to do that is to get them into player-run corps,
into the community.
And what? No, the best way of getting people involved in the game is to get people involved in doing an activity with a bunch of other people, and by that I mean like heavily involved. Like I very much sort of like falling back on my own kind of experience here is like, you know, it was very much a casual game when I was just like, you know, mission running and doing various different things in HiSec and stuff like that. And yeah, you know, you can join a group of people and sort of, you know, have that conversation, have a nice sort of like, you know, social kind of network going on. But like, until you actually, you know, kind of decide to have like some proper skin in the game, actually be responsible for something with regards to inside of your group, that is when the game basically kind of like starts to really encompass you, and you start to really get like gripped into the game, is when, you know, you are responsible for some aspect of, you know, everyone else's play, you know, inside of your social group, right? And I think the thing is, you know, and this, I don't want to. I want to try and not like ask a leading question to Mike here, but it's kind of difficult to do so for this. But like,
go for it. I don't mind.
Do you? Okay, like this will sound leading. I'm trying not to make it sound leading, but it's going to be like that. But like, do you feel that like the erosion of people needing other people to do certain jobs in the game? It is responsible for a lot of like people like just leaving the game because they don't have any skin in the game, when, you know, it's just much easier to spin up an alt to do that.
Okay, two things connected partially to this, but it's also, I've been making notes to myself. Do you know what trailer for EVE brought the most players into the game?
Ellis.
Oof.
This is EVE. The one trailer that showed players playing and the voices of players playing. I recognized a lot of voices in that trailer because they were real FCs, real players. It was showing the gaming community that we had communities within the game that drew players in. Now, when the players first come in, they're in HiSec, and I agree, it'd be great if we could fast route them somehow, but not through the predatory new bro friendly corporations that predate HiSec. You probably can name some. There's a very famous story that made the gaming media of goon swarms rescuing new bros from pretty much a slave mine. You know, that sort of thing happens. The thing is that in HiSec communities don't happen as organically, because every time that Eve has added a HiSec community building activity, there's been complaints about we have to move this to nullsec. I'm thinking incursions off the top of my head. Homefront operations is the latest thing that encourages groups of 5 to go out and do things together. I wish Kashal was here right now. I think it's Kashal. The New Bro Roams is becoming something that is actually starting to build a HiSec community that is actually a pipeline to low and null. Is a chance for them to see what it's like to fly in a fleet and say, if you want to do this on a full-time basis, we're casual at it. You want to go join the big groups, the big boys down there. But being able to form groups and community activities to show the players that we're a game of community. Like, I can't remember, I think it was Soth that was saying, you know, Eve is an okay game. The community is what makes it an excellent game. It is the people that bind us together, not the graphics, not the gameplay, sure as hell ain't the PvE. Now, the opposite side of the coin is when you have gameplay like Abyssal Space. Instance is the exact opposite of all of this community building, because it is at best 3 players, but most people who run Abyssals run it as a solo player. You know, I do, although as one of the bus side activities, lesser known, is I actually run tours into the Abyss, taking 2 or 3 new bros. I give them a ship and say, come on, I'll show you the Abyss, and take them into a T0 or a T1 just so they can see what it's about. That's building community in one of these solo-centric parts of the game, but it's also teaching people it's a good idea to talk to other players, to learn, to grow. So do we need to build the community more? Yes. Do we need to have more gankers shooting new bros and saying, hi, welcome to the community? No.
Well, a minor point there.
Fire away.
You talk about one of the big obstacles to building communities in HiSec was that whenever there's a new activity in HiSec, there's always we need to export this to null somehow. But I'd posit that the reason that communities in lowsec and nullsec tend to have more staying power and HiSec tends to fall apart more quickly is actually something far more fundamental to human nature. When you're out in nullsec, everybody else is out to get you.
Nuh-uh.
No, Eric. I'm not saying like, you know, I'm not saying that like, you know, when you're out in Goonswarm, everybody in Goonswarm is going to screw you. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying just the opposite.
Right.
Those are the people you can rely on. Your community are the people you depend on. You have to depend on. Because everybody else out there is coming to kill you.
Yep.
Yeah, it's all tribalism. In HiSec, yeah, you can go incursioning with these guys, but when you're not incursioning, you don't need to deal with those people at all. You can go off and deal with other people in HiSec.
No, that's a fair thing. But the funny thing was, when I was a strong advocate of the incursion community for a few years, right when it started, like I was there when the live events were happening. And a lot of the incursion FCs were straight out of nullsec, and they came up to run in HiSec to make some extra cash. But, you know, it'd be funny to have an incursion fleet and the main logistics guy and the FC would be arguing because they were on opposite sides of a war down in nullsec, or discussing the battle that they'd been on opposite sides of. It was kind of like
I can see that.
you know, the neutral territory where enemies could come and work together and see the other side. It was a cool thing, and I was very disappointed when they cut it back, but it was considered a major risk flow of its time. Faucet, that is.
Now, I did have a question that kind of touches on a bunch of the different topics that that has been brought up about Citadel balance and mid-scale alliances being pushed out of null, and in the way that those interact, it also effectively winds up dealing with community building, because when you don't have the mid-scale alliances, you're missing an important kind of community that allows people to get out of HiSec into a more cohesive group where it's not thousands of people who don't actually know each other. But, you know, talking about Ansiblex is driving the mid-scale alliances out of null. My question is actually more about something else that pushes them out. When you come into nullsec, now obviously you could just live in NPC null and then you've got stations and whatever. Like the full nullsec experience, shall we say, is owning space, controlling space. If you don't have a sizable super capital fleet, you're not going to hold space. If you want a sizable super capital fleet and you've got limited numbers of people, you need to be able to get out of those super capitals so that you can, you know, put those skilled pilots to work on things like getting money and running sites and, you know, all the other things that go into actually getting your indices up and owning space. But if you don't have the people and the super capitals to defend a keep star, you can't get out of the ships. And if so, do you guys feel that there's an issue with the fact that keep stars aren't just the big null blocks can put down the most defensible citadels, but also that they give this additional capability of we can repurpose our most skill point intensive characters to doing other things besides sitting in a coffin in a small pause?
That kind of does. It certainly exists, right? Like having to coffin your super account if you're not part of a big block alliance that can hold the keepstar is definitely something that is a negative effect of them spiraling. It's a damper to medium-sized alliance for sure. But the thing is, most people have a dedicated super alt, or their capital is on an alt anyway, and the sub-capital account is on their main account. And medium-sized alliances work that way. Like Trigger Happy is a good example. They had their accounts, like the supers are not on their main account because you want the capitals stowed away until the battle goes on to see what the enemy drops so you can escalate or not escalate. So you already want the super capitals on an alt account anyway because you're not dropping that as a first option. So yes, keep stars might be a factor why medium-sized alliances could struggle to build up a capital core, but it's definitely not the main factor. And the main factors are, as I pointed out earlier, when I talk to these people and ask them what happened, it's income in nullsec isn't worth holding nullsec at the moment, just because the activities in other parts of space just massively outcompete them in an economic sense. And at the same time, even if you don't care about the economic incentive, alliances that had their own soft and put up their space flag, they just got their sandcastle knocked over, and it didn't feel like the adversaries put in a massive effort because their logistics were that much easier than their own. And they didn't make other people deploy. Like CVA was notorious, for example, for making big alliances deploy to them. They got completely knocked out, all their structures removed, but they just kept continuously attacking Providence again, taking the space back, because they knew our enemy doesn't want to keep defending these timers all the time because they have to move all the way through the galaxy from the main staging. So eventually these people will leave and we will take our space back. This calculation is not as prevalent anymore, because if you can teleport through space for a short period of time, you can stay 5 regions away and still defend space somewhere else, just because you can do it. And that activity is like that calculation is completely gone through the projection and the speed of Ansiplexes.
But
and Commander Starscream, I completely agree in chat. Like, yeah, CVA had other problems as well, but I just want to point on that one part of being notorious for your own region.
But that
I heard,
that problem, that capability of moving just as quickly, existed before Ansiblexes. The old jump bridges, you could still do it.
You stack fatigue when taking multiple, so you couldn't do it over 5 regions.
We didn't have fatigue back then.
Okay, yeah, but later we had it, and then we didn't have it. Yeah,
players.
yeah, but if we go back to these times, then alliances were also not as centralized with Discord in every alliances, and there have been some meta changes as well, right? So
well,
of course there are different things.
We certainly were.
Yeah,
I did hear
I
did hear a concession there from you that other people who want jump bridges gone or Antiplex don't give the nullsec players, and that's you are saying making ISK in nullsec should be easier because the risk is higher, especially if you nerf Antiplex, right?
The risk is higher than other parts of space. That's for certain, yes. And I never argue that point, and I actually agree. I think wormholes are super, super safe. They just say they are spooky. But if you think about the mechanics of wormhole space, you see the anomalies, you can scan them down, you can have scouts on your holds, you can see if an anomaly pops up, and you can make the connections critical before somebody enters, so only a limited amount of ships can even enter your site, so they're not a big threat to your own group. I'm not arguing that nullsec isn't super, super safe. What I'm saying is, if nullsec is a risky space, then it should get rewards, but at the same time, it should be accessible to all sizes of groups. And Ansiplexes might make it safer for what you're saying, but couldn't we just balance that with higher rewards? At the same time, we can remove that aspect that makes medium alliances completely disappear. We can have both at the same time. That's why I'm saying I don't want to remove Ansiplexes and do nothing. I want to, or nerf Ansiplexes. I don't want to remove them. Sorry for the wrong phrasing. Let's put a dampen on the super fast projection and at the same time increase the reward of actually being out in space in nullsec. That has to come in tandem.
Or give more resources in a smaller space so that the big blocks don't feel the need to sprawl as much as they do, right?
But the resources are the reason why big blocks sprawl. There's no reason to sprawl just because of resources. It's not needed.
Well, it's both the resources and it's a defense mechanism.
This defense mechanism only works because you can project over 5 regions, so you can get a buffer region of 5 regions. Yes. Otherwise, that buffer region wouldn't need to exist because the other side isn't transpassing these 5 regions so fast. And at the same time, it would be super hard to hold these 5 regions at the same time because anybody could come in, toast your iHub, TCU, or anything. And if you have to respond over 5 regions, and there would be a serious time investment, you cannot always project from your staging. You actually have to redeploy maybe a smaller force, a signature, or something else, which again would be part of community building, which you advocated for.
Okay, so two points on the resources aren't the reason that these groups need to expand over 5 regions. First, moon resources are very, very much distributed over a wide amount of space. You're not going to get, for example, if you want, I'm not going to say which one it is, but if you want a certain type of moon goo, there is one moon in all of Delve that gives it. One. So that pushes toward expansion. But more, one of the resources that very much pushes some groups, not necessarily the Imperium, to expand and hold as absolutely many ungodly, there's no reason they would need this many regions otherwise as they can, is rent. Like, that's the biggest reason for sprawl, is to have the space to rent out to,
whoever.
Basically,
Slumlord.
But here again, right, is one centralized entity couldn't have as much renting space if they need time to project to their border regions. First. Second thing is, rent is a massive problem, but at the same time, there would be more groups interfering with these floodplains if there would be an incentive for an active group to go there. I take my group as an example. We would be very capable of taking certain parts of space, especially with the adjacent Fera groups and the people that I have contacts with. There's just no reason for us to do so, because none of us is building a rent empire, none of us is building a botting empire, and there's no reason to interfere with these botting farms because there's no passive benefit to us to go for these groups. So first of all, you couldn't maintain that renting belt if it wouldn't be for the projection. Second, that renting belt would be attacked if there would be an incentive for medium-sized groups that I called out to attack these that renting space because they want to claim it as their own. So again, it's the duality of the things that I stated.
Gideon,
it's limiting projection and getting income.
I just want to clarify here. We are not arguing against your ideas. We are simply explaining how we got here in the process, right?
Yeah, but I'm but in your argumentation for how you got there, you pointed out why I'm advocating for these things. Because in your argumentation, you stated like the floodplains can only be maintained and exist because of the projection, right?
Yes, I am arguing for your point. So
okay,
take it.
Gideon is arguing for himself.
Anyway,
as another,
I just looked at the clock.
On that.
I just looked at the clock, and I was reminded that we have CSM candidates here, and some of them might be busy with CCP interviews soon. So
they will be, yes.
Yeah. So we should go into our one last thing segment, and I think Mike wants to start because he has to run off soon.
Yeah, just I can try the patience of my family, but only so far. You know, only been married for 30 some years, so don't want to ruin the honeymoon. The one last thing. Look, we're asking you to vote. There are some really good candidates. Some of them are here today. Some of them didn't make it on to Push to Talk. They're on other things. I just would really, really like to encourage the voters as a whole. Look up your candidates, find out what you want to vote for and how you want to be represented, whether you want to be represented as a geographical area, as a play style, as a knowledge base. There's tons of ways to choose who to vote for, whether you want somebody who's good at talking or whether you want somebody who knows all their stuff but can't explain it to a 5-year-old, which sometimes you feel like you're doing that when you're talking to CCP. Yes, I cast shade with the best of them. Don't get mad at me. Voting starts on September 4th and runs through to, I think, September 11th, so it's right around the corner. If you vote for me, I'd appreciate it. If you put me further down on your ballot, I won't be surprised. But I'd like a few initial votes because the way STV goes, how many votes you have at the start determines whether you're going to last long enough to pick up those extra votes from being further down your ballot. Some of the people here have probably have institutionalized ballots, and they will be told from their masters in space who to vote for and what order to vote. I haven't seen any of the big official ballots yet. I don't know. Soth, has Goonswarm put theirs out yet?
Oh, you're asking the guy who has stepped down from everything. I don't know.
Okay, Erik.
I don't know either. We have no inside information. We really don't. I mean, if I knew, I have a rule.
I'm going to ask horrendous.
Our current director is not with us today. I actually stepped down earlier this year.
So, by the way,
I know, right? I will say this. In my capacity as an editor at INN, I have not seen a goon ballot.
Yeah.
So. Okay, but I'm not. That's not saying there isn't going to be one. It just means that it hasn't officially come out yet.
It hasn't been handed down. Yeah.
I would expect it would come out. Right? Yeah.
There is one tin-hatted person who I'm very disappointed hasn't shown up this year in my thread, who always accuses me of being a goon spy. And for those of you who don't know, that is quite unlikely. My favorite line was from CSM 10 when, who was the Imperium representative at that point? I told him how I play my game, and he looked at me in horror and said, "You're an anarchist." And I said, yeah, pretty much. And he just backed away like it was the equivalent of saying, you have AIDS and leprosy. You know, he was really frightened by somebody who has no respect for organizations whatsoever and yet is running in an election. So if you vote for me, I would appreciate it. If you don't and you vote for Yondu or Gideon or any of the other candidates out there, please vote. Fill out your ballot with all 10 names and hope that one of them gets in. It's a really cool thing that CCP does, and become a part of it, if not by running, then by voting. And sorry, I do have to bow out because my wife has given me the high sign that there are things that need doing before I go on to the CCP CSM interview later this afternoon.
Oh, that would have been Andy.
All right. Well, hey, Mike, thanks.
That's totally cool, Mike. Yeah. You don't worry, Mike. You can drop the your camera and stuff like that. Like you're not going to screw up anything in the show whatsoever. So like, yeah.
That's because of McLeod's amazing design, by the way. As you know, just pointing that out.
There you go. See, just auto kind of like sorted itself out there.
It did.
Lovely. And somebody said that like that would never work. Oh, it definitely does.
That would never work.
It would never. That wouldn't have been me because it wasn't me.
You'd never get people to put like put their own place names or like name whatchamacallits like on their own kind of thing and broadcast it. No, not at all. Like except
I love it.
People do. Yeah. So we might as well go down the list, right? Gideon. Well, any final last thing, anything that you wanted to talk about or say, or any shout outs or anything like that? Like
I would say I want to give a shout out to NPSI communities that like Spectre Fleet, Kiakitis, even better with friends. If you are playing the game in an area you don't want to align with any side, or you don't want to get involved into politics, these can be groups that you can interact with and build a community of like-minded people and find people and maybe build a community of your own with them. We have seen people do that from Spectre Fleet and split off and do their own thing within the universe. Feel free to reach out to these communities. They will welcome you with open arms and get you into the game. So if you are at a point in time where you just don't know which alliance to join, or you don't want to because sometimes people have some social barriers, these groups will easily get you involved if you really want to.
Awesome. Yondu.
So I would like to invite people to vote, even if they don't have a candidate, just go randomly. And like if you will be voting, try to vote for the topic rather than the flag that you're flying under, because the topic is there why the CSM is voted for, not because he's in Guns or Horde or Fraternity, doesn't matter. It's there for the idea to get through to the CCP and to be there also for the player and the CCP. So feel free to vote whoever you wish. My topic is industry. Same as for Angry Mustache. Feel free to choose us if you wish to. And if not, then thank you for consideration.
Nice. Right, let's go down the list of like, staff, as it were. Horrendous.
Vote. I don't care who you vote for. Just frickin' vote. There you go.
Eric?
I'm just going to say whatever your party line is, vote it. Be it Goons, whoever. I mean, I think, I am a proponent of large-scale gameplay. I think that's what brings the majority of players to the game. I think, that's my thing. But I do thank all of the CSM candidates that have come, last week and this week. I appreciate it. Hearing your side and what you have to say is always interesting. That's it.
Nice. Soth.
Yeah. First of all, I want to thank all all of the CSM candidates that came on today. Thank you for actually heeding the call and getting on here. And I also want to shout out the CSM candidates who couldn't be here because they were busy both last week and this week. I just want to let the viewers know who we considered to be on the show that couldn't make it. That would be White Orchid, Torvald Urus, Dutch Gunner, The Oss, and Larkness. And all of them were busy.
And Pando.
And
was busy
Pando,
today.
yes. I hear Pando is busy right now.
Yes.
That would be an interesting talk with my handler. I haven't heard from him in a while.
He seems to have gone dark for some reason. I don't know why. He's not returning your calls.
We haven't been in this. We can't be seen in the same room, obviously.
Yeah. I'd like to say, Horrendous, you deserve. Hang on, you deserve this. Because I was
really?
Because I mean, I was heavily kind of hinting at something that I thought was like a significant, like, you know, downward pressure on everything on basically when we were talking about, like, you know, nullsec and trying to get small groups to sort of get into nullsec kind of thing. Like, a lot of what I consider to be a significant downward pressure to that is basically the proliferation and the continual sort of like downward pressure of supercaps and titans. Like, basically it's like, you know, if you don't have supercaps and titans, you might or have friends with supercaps or titans, like, your days in nullsec,
there's just no
getting a group, like, or getting some space is just basically there's no point, right? So, and like, that was what I was basically trying to get at when I, like, you know, hinting at sort of thing.
But at the same time,
you know,
you're hinting at it, and I kind of disagree, because at the moment, dreadnoughts are by far the best ISK per fighting power that you can field. Or at least these are the easiest to replace and reproduce compared to super capitals. So you don't need to go to the capital umbrella, and capitals are very, very dockable in NPC stations and in smaller structures. So I get what you're saying with keepsters, but the regular caps are accessible, and medium alliance could just work without super capitals. Medium alliances did work and can work without a super big super umbrella. They cannot work with constant projection all the time.
The thing that made them.
But when you plant your flag, like, you can't be
sending the supers after you had to worry about somebody else's supers coming after them.
But if I could use, like, example of Brave Collective, we never had a sort of, to speak like your sizes, super cup umbrellas. We moved like 10 times over the years. We moved because we were cast out mostly, but we set up in these new places not because we had super umbrellas, but we could make friends. Like, we fought you for 2 years, right, guys? And now we are neighbors, basically over the fence of Clownring. But it's not about how many supers you have. It's more on how the small alliance can make friends with the big neighbor, or if it's even tolerated as a neighbor for such. Because, for example, you know that we are in the north, between meat shield between you and Fraternity, but Fraternity doesn't tolerate us. You decided to tolerate us, but is that because you tolerate us, or do you not want the bigger neighbor next to you? So it's more like you do not need a super umbrella, because even if you were a small group with 50 supers, you would get killed, right? So if you're a small group, you have to play the small game of chess, which is there between the big players. So make friends, and or make payroll of that big neighbor that you have, which is the other side of it that is doing that right now, paying everyone to be their friend, right?
I think we tolerate you because Brave is always up for giving you a fight instead of just stomping you when you come to Brave space.
Brave has generally been cool people the whole way through. I mean,
It
depends on the mood.
For me, as someone who trained FCs back in the day, I would send the newbie FCs to Brave Space, being like, hey, yeah, just sit there in their staging and talk to them in local, and they will undock a fleet for you.
Oh my god!
I mean, it's about having fun at the end of the game, right? You play the game to have fun.
Soph and I had a plan at one point, and I think he still got the ships for this. When Brave was doing their we're gonna be crazy and just come at you in Corvettes, rah stuff. We put together 150 Reapers with actual combat fittings, like purchased modules.
Like actual Tech 2 fits.
We were just gonna go. I'd like go run down to Brave Space and be like, "Pah!" Like I said, you guys were always fun to hang around with. It never needed to be anything like that.
Right. The only other thing that I wanted to make a point out of is just to remind people that CCP are going to be doing interviews with all of the candidates, or at least as many candidates as they can do. So if you haven't seen an interview for a particular candidate that you're thinking of, then keep an eye out on CCP's Twitch stream for candidate interviews. I'm sure everybody here running for CSM are going to be interested in and making time for the interviews from the CSM from CCP. Sorry, and I'd like to implore everybody, and because when I see this happening on the on the election kind of stream, I'm not sure they're doing an election stream or not today, like this year anyway. But I hate seeing it when they do the live results sort of thing, where you just see people's ballots just fall and like their votes just end up becoming nothing because they only voted for like 4 people. Fill out your ballot all the fucking way.
And
don't vote for just one person.
Just ask your friends or ask me. Like I will just draw random candidates out of a hat for your ballot.
If needs be.
Totally not rigged.
Hint: they won't be random.
Dark shines.
But just fill out like the entirety of your ballot. Like there's no point just having your vote get wasted because the last person on your ballot of 4 or 3 or 2 like just didn't get in and got eliminated, right? So yeah, fill out your ballot because it's like I think tomorrow is literally the last day of the CSM campaign period, and then it's like basically the voting period is next week. As for what's coming up, specifically on INN, Meta Show actually is not happening this like later on today. So it'll be we'll have a Meta Show next week, I think, and I think we'll also be having some stuff from some next week. So Meta Show will be coming back next week. There will be I think Izzy will be starting up another stream a little after us for some more Starfield kind of gameplay. But then you've got your usual sort of stuff when it comes to sort of next week. So you've got like Wormhole Wednesdays. I think maybe Theta Thursday is coming back. You got another Starfield stream as well later on the Friday. So that's if you're interested in any of that, then check out Imperium News.
All right. Anyone else? We got
apparently
everybody?
There's fireworks going on behind me.
There's fireworks
Thanks
going
for
on.
the invitation.
Real fireworks, or Oh, you're very welcome. By the way, as we do, I mean, anytime, elected or not, right? anytime any guest wants to be back on the show, all they have to do is just reach out in Discord and say, hey, I'd like to be on the show, because, you know, we just let folks come on. It's kind of fun that way, right? We don't...
Yeah.
While we all may have a Imperium-centric point of view or something like that, like an all-sec block type point of view, that doesn't mean that we have the show be exclusively that way, right?
What do you mean, Eric? I'm a tournament guy.
Yeah, you're a tournament guy.
I've fought goons before. I've literally killed goons before, like, you know. So, you know, I've done all things.
What do you mean, Mac? I fought goons as well. I was an FC. That's how you FC in goons.
Salt's probably gotten more goons killed than anybody else here.
That's probably true.
Yeah.
Truth be told.
But only because Boat's not here.
Ooh, shots fired. Shots fired. Oh my god, I can't believe it.
Boat probably has the most blue kills of any goon, to be fair. Or at least
he does.
The cause.
By the way, and we're 4 minutes over, so let's get out of here. But bye. See you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Have a great long weekend, those of you in the United States. You know, have a great one. Enjoy barbecues. It's the thing.